And we introduce our friend, Fox's own Peter Doocy. He's traveling with the president. He joins us now from Riyadh. Hey, Peter, how are you? How's it going over there in Saudi Arabia?
It was a really interesting day. For security reasons, we had to get to the president's, the venue where the president was going to speak hours beforehand. So we got to hear pretty much every panelist. And this oil-rich country that has all this money because of oil is trying to move on to renewable energy. They want to be a world capital of artificial intelligence here. But artificial intelligence data hubs require so much energy. And so for now, they want to use oil to power them. But the Crown Prince, a young guy, has this ambitious Saudi 2030 plan where they are trying to use the world's best technology and develop stuff with all these captains of industry that they had gathered there today from all different kinds of fields. They want to try to figure out just, we've got the space here in Saudi Arabia. It might be in the middle of nowhere, but we'll get you whatever you need. Just make this happen within the next 5 years. And to your point, Will, it's really interesting about how they do have so much money here to spend, and they have money coming in, but it might not impact the middle class as much. I was speaking to a Saudi official, a pair of Saudi officials actually, while I was getting a coffee at the little kiosk today in between speakers. And one of the guys asked me, what did I think of Riyadh? And I told him there are some very nice Western shops by the hotels where all the press are staying. And this official said to me, doesn't it remind you of the Tyson's Galleria, which is the mall kind of by my house? That's where we go, not for the nice shopping, because there's a Maggiano's there and it's easy leftovers. But they are developing parts of this country that are becoming as nice as the really, really wealthy parts of the U.S. that are wealthy because of government spending, like the Washington, D.C. suburbs. And so the things that they are trying to do here are happening very quickly, and there are definite parallels to the rise of certain parts of the U.S.
We would hope that doesn't include parallels to a stagnant middle class here at home. You want to see an economy benefit everyone. We'll wait to see how that occurs, and if that occurs in Saudi Arabia. Just really quickly, I know you mentioned Maggiano's. You had some McDonald's available for you. The media truck in Saudi Arabia made sure you had McDonald's over there. So a friendly climate there, Peter. But I'm really interested in the climate that was received or offered up to President Trump and how that compares to maybe what we saw when we saw visits from Joe Biden.
When I was here with Joe Biden, we were in Jeddah, which is a seaside community a couple hours away. People go there. The wealthy go there because it is cooler in the summer. And the whole headline of that trip was that Joe Biden could not convince them to release more barrels of oil to bring down the cost of gas in the U.S. But Joe Biden did fist bump MBS, and that was all that we had to go for, that picture.
Right.
Today, it was kind of extraordinary. We were not at a Trump rally. We were in the middle of Riyadh. More than half the crowd were Saudi businessmen. And Donald Trump stood there for the entirety of Lee Greenwood's Proud to Be an American as the opening song. He wasn't pumping his fist. He literally just stood there. And as soon as the song stopped playing, everybody went crazy clapping. And so he was received very well. Something that I did notice, this particular crowd was a lot more enthusiastic in terms of clapping and cheering when President Trump talked about eventually recognizing, fixing things in Gaza and moving beyond that war than they were when he was talking about the efforts that he made to release the last remaining American hostage from Hamas captivity. You know, that's an unofficial poll that we would not be allowed to use with the Fox News polling department, but it was a noticeable difference in enthusiasm from the crowd. But he was received very well. And to the picture that you just put up, I have had more people send me that McDonald's truck that we sat next to at the media center than pretty much anything I've been sent in the last month. And I know that someday when I tell my son, who is a month old, about Dad's trip to Saudi Arabia with Donald Trump, he is going to ask me about that.
Yeah, he'll ask whether or not you got a Quarter Pounder or a Big Mac, and you'll have the answer, I hope, Peter. All right. We appreciate you joining us there from Riyadh. Now I hope you go get some rest, as it's obviously late at night in Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Peter. You heard Peter mention the entourage. You heard me earlier mention Elon Musk. The event had an impressive roster of business leaders in attendance with tech giants like Musk, but also Zuckerberg, OpenAI's Sam Altman, and many others on that list, on that screen that you can see joining Donald Trump. The guest list is highlighting that AI is a major investment focus. You heard Peter say that Saudi Arabia is looking to move beyond an oil economy, but not just about renewables, into tomorrow's technology. That's something that my next guests know a lot about. Gladstone AI co-founders Jeremy Harris and Edward Harris join me now. Guys, I'm glad to have you here with me. The question I want to start with is, we talk about everything that's happening in Saudi Arabia, the potential investment of Saudi dollars in U.S. interests. But why does that matter to average Americans? How does this help average Americans?
Well, if you think about the strategic nature of the technology, right, we're looking at AI, and the administration is increasingly as a dual-use technology, something that could be ultimately even like a weapon of mass destruction, maybe, right above a certain scale. These things could help automate cyber attacks, help do things like design bioweapons. And so through that lens, you start to think about the global competition for this technology. Look, this looks like a story that's about the U.S. and it's about the Middle East. In reality, a big part of it is U.S.-China. And this is happening through the Saudis, through the UAE, as not quite proxies, but important players in the mix. And so when you think about how America positions itself to have dominance on AI over China, that has to flow through things like Saudi capital, Saudi energy. We're talking right now about a partnership potentially where NVIDIA builds data centers in Saudi Arabia in a context where China's really good at finding sneaky ways to get access to advanced AI technology, subverting kind of U.S. export controls by using third-party countries like potentially Saudi Arabia. We've seen that in Malaysia, Singapore. So something like that, that's part of the package of security guarantees the Trump administration is going to want out of this. Let's make sure if we build stuff, critical AI infrastructure in your borders, that you don't go off and ship it to our adversaries like China.
Let's stay on security for just a moment, Edward, because I don't think China should be the only lens through which we view security. We have a complicated past with Saudi Arabia. Of course, there's the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist. There's also the connections and the investigations and the evidence when it comes to 9/11. How comfortable should we be doing deals with Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think it depends on what kinds of controls and what kinds of guarantees we put in place in advance of and during those deals. One of the key pieces here is establishing security around any data center builds that we do there. And one of the things that has been floated, at least in the chatter there, is this idea of data center or data embassies, rather. And the idea of a data embassy is a little bit like this. Just as the French embassy is a small enclave of French sovereign territory in D.C., where the embassy building is located, there would be a small enclave of United States territory in Saudi Arabia where a data center would be sited. Now, it's still inside and embedded inside the Saudi country, and there's Saudi power flowing in. But you may be able to set up something like that with much higher security guarantees around American technology. And there are a lot of things that need to go right for that to work, but it is an idea that has been floated around in these negotiations from what we've heard.
Very fascinating development. We know that one of the motivations of Osama bin Laden was his displeasure with the fact that there's American military bases on Saudi soil. You're talking about sovereign embassies of data centers on Saudi soil. It's a complicated area that we're getting involved in and invested in. And in the end, it is part of a larger story of both foreign and domestic investment in the interests of the United States. But let's take this full circle one more time. If you're watching from home right now and you're an American sitting in Kansas City, how does this news today potentially, hopefully positively impact your life?
Well, you're definitely going to see a lot of Saudi dollars, potentially, and UAE dollars coming in to fund big data center builds in the United States. And one of the
potentially in Kansas.
Yeah, potentially in Kansas, that's true, right? That's kind of what's going on with a lot of these sites. Is they do tend to be in those sorts of areas that are hot, like very low population density, have a lot of power coming in. That's the sweet spot, and that's where you need the most jobs, right? In many cases. So there's a positive story there for sure. One of the big things we got to get right though is securing these facilities. Right now, there's like espionage and sabotage risk galore. One of the things we've been doing is working with a team, as far as we know, it's the most advanced team working on this, on how do you secure these new builds, like multi-billion-dollar builds against Chinese and foreign adversary espionage and sabotage. Right now, that's not being done. Like a lot of these new builds do not have that level of security. So we want to make sure we capture the benefits. We set up these facilities. They lead to great jobs, and that will happen. We want to make sure we can capture the full benefits with the security in place.
Which includes owning supply chains and, of course, the security on site, whether domestically or in Saudi Arabia. Jeremy, Edward, thank you guys so much for being with me here today. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.